Shalom. First and foremost, I want to open up by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rechakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and preach the truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopefully elect. This is the brother Amawan Ayash from the GMS Indianapolis camp, coming back at you with another quick lesson through the spirit and power, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And I'm not going to make this lesson too long. Lord willing, I pray to the Lord, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, that this lesson is indeed edifying, short, and straight to the point. But pretty much I was watching this video that was put into the group entitled, Why Are So Many Baddies Suddenly Living in Their Cars? And, ultimately we're in that time where the Lord, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, is bringing the pride of these women to naught. Okay, because, throughout, the past, several years, man, decades even, there's been a strong rise in feminism, which, the scriptures talk about feminism. Let's go ahead and get this in the book of Jeremiah, the 31st chapter. Okay. And verse 22 says, How long wilt thou go about, O thou backsliding daughter? Which the backsliding daughter refers to the nation of Israel, in which ultimately our backslidings go into our transgressions, our disobedience, all right, us going astray from the law, statutes, and commandments that the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai gave unto us as a people. It says, For the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai hath created a new thing in the earth. A woman shall compass a man. So due to our disobedience against the Lord, us going astray from the law, statutes, and commandments, right, the Lord created a new thing in the earth. And the reason why this is a new thing in the earth is also because from the very beginning, we know that ultimately the order that the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai established was for the man to be the head over the woman. All right, the man to be the head of the house. The scriptures go into how the Lord created the woman for the man, and how a woman is supposed to be in subjection under her husband. But like it says, for the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai hath created a new thing in the earth, a woman shall compass a man. And when you deal with that word compass, it says to turn about, or around, or aside, or back. It says, or towards, go about, or around, surround, encircle, change direction. And ultimately, these women, for the past several decades, they've been going in the opposite direction. Or in other words, they've been going against the order that the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai has established from the very beginning. Women in this society are put on the pedestal. They don't submit to the order, to the instruction of their husbands. Our women are not submissive. They're not feminine. Okay, but they've been given this false illusion of them having free will, being able to do whatever they want, them being better than a man. Which that's a false illusion, because we know at the end of the day that women, they are inferior to men. Okay, but this society has, put it within their heads that, they anything a man can do, they can do. Right, they're better than men, so on and so forth. They don't need to submit to a man. It says to turn about, be brought round, change. It says here, it says to turn about, change, transform. And compared to, the ancient days, nowadays today, man, the average woman isn't really all that feminine. They're masculine, always wanting to challenge a man, refusing to be submissive, and feminine, which that's how they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be submissive and feminine. The scriptures talk about this, but now in today's day and age with the rise of feminism, all right, women have completely forgotten how to be a woman. Let's see. It says here, to cause, to go around, surround, encompass. And women have completely gone around the authority of a man to do their own thing. And see, that's literally feminism, in which within feminism, we know that really, man, They say that feminism is the idea that a woman is equal to a man. But really, man, when you actually look into it and observe it, feminism is the idea that, women are over men, that women are better than men. Which ultimately that's not the case. You see? So let me go from there to the book of 1 Timothy, the 5th chapter, and verse 6. It says, "But she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth." Excuse me, Salakia. And ultimately, these women have done nothing but live in pleasure. Okay, here it is. They always getting dressed up like thoughts, going to bars and clubs and just sitting there, hoping that their beauty, allures a man in, that they can get an unlimited supply of drinks. Women using their bodies, to make money and things of that nature. These women out here being promiscuous and being whores. All right, but ultimately doing all that and neglecting to be a woman and do the deeds of a woman, as the scripture tells you. All right, ultimately you're doing nothing but bringing death upon yourself. So these women who are only dead set on pleasures of this life, and not actually being a woman, wanting to be submissive to a man, wanting to be with the husband, bear his children, maintain the house, hey, these bitches are just waiting on death, man. Let me go from there to the book of Isaiah, the 32nd chapter. And we'll start at verse 2 and then we'll jump down. It says, "And a man shall be as an hiding place from the wind and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as a shadow of a great rock in a weary land." You see, and also basically what this is saying is that a man is going to be sought after for protection in the days of affliction, in the days of trouble and tribulation. Which ultimately it's not just any man, it's a man of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Because the Lord, he's not going to deliver all men in the days to come. All right, the Lord, he's only with his servants. Okay, and with these so-called baddies, lived in their cars, they didn't really have a home to live and things of that nature. All right, we can see what the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, is doing on the planet Earth. And ultimately what the Lord is doing, he's putting these women in a position to where they're going to have no choice but to acknowledge that they're going to need a man to survive in these last days. And these women living in the cars, man, that's just the beginning of it, man. As we can see, a lot of these women, man, they're still proud in heart, still refusing to humble down, be feminine, seek after a man, which, you shouldn't be seeking after just any man. You should be seeking after a man of the Lord. Okay, so basically, man, these women, they're going to need that one huge event, to basically, force them into submission. As the scriptures talk about here in the book of Psalms, the 110th chapter, if I'm not mistaken. Excuse me, Salakia. Yep, Psalms chapter 110 and verse 3. It says, "Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power." You see, so when all hell is breaking loose and the Lord is bringing forth these judgments, hey, that's when, our people are going to want to get in line and be obedient, both men and women. But we know, especially, we're going into the topic of women. All right, these women are going to be forced to acknowledge that, they're not going to be able to make it out of here, all right, alive by themselves. All right, they're going to acknowledge that they need a man of the Lord. It says, "In the beautiness of holiness from the womb of the morning, thou hast the dew of thy youth." Which ultimately we know the Lord is getting ready to bring spiritual power into his men. And guess what? These women, they're going to take note of that. They're going to notice that and they're going to flock into the man of the Lord. All right, hence the prophecy Isaiah 4:1. You see, so when the Lord is bringing these judgments and the Lord raises up his men with that spiritual power, right? And the Lord is executing judgment through his men. All right, Jake is going to be willing, all right, to do what's right in that day. And these women, they're going to want to be women again. All right, they're going to go back to being feminine, submissive and soft overnight, man. When all hell break loose. But let's jump back to Isaiah the 32nd chapter, and we'll jump down to verse 9. It says, "Rise up, ye women that are at ease." You see, and ultimately we can see that these women have been living an easy life. Once again, as I was stating earlier, these women, they using their beauty, their curves and their outward appearance to basically, when they're out in public, at the bars, try to get free drinks out of men, which that's one of many examples. You got bitches on social media with Cash App and Venmo and all this other bullshit in their bio. Having simps just send them money just because they're beautiful. But the Lord is bringing all that shit to naught, man. A lot of these women been able to live off of benefits from the government, man. Well, the Lord is taking all that shit away, man. Hey, we in that time where men in general are waking up, man. Beauty is not the main standard, nowadays, that's going to get a man to wife you for the most part. Now, you still have those simps out there that see a bitch with a big ass, some nice titties, a pretty face, a long hair. Her personality is full of shit, right? But they look beyond all that because of the outward appearance. You still got simps that do that. But for the most part, man, a lot of men ain't going for that shit no more. It says, "Rise up, you women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. Give ear unto my speech." And ultimately, these women have lived completely careless. They didn't think or consider that, them being promiscuous, getting over on men, forsaking the order that was set up, which, once again, women are supposed to be submissive to their husband. And ultimately, we know, beginning with the so-called black woman, she's the main one who went against her man, the so-called black man, the Israelite man. All right, but this goes for all women. You see, so y'all didn't consider that, there will be consequences for your actions. Y'all completely live carelessly, man. Okay, you thought you was going to be able to rip men off forever, jump from man to man forever without being punished. Well, we coming into the time of the great humbling, man, in which the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is going to bring forth all these judgments and bring the pride of man to naught, and especially the pride of you women. It says, "Many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, the gathering shall not come." And see, so ultimately, y'all that's living off these benefits and things of that nature, all right, the Lord is stripping these things away day by day. And once again, as I said earlier, the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is putting you women in a position to where you're going to be forced to acknowledge that the only way you're going to survive is through one of his men. And we know, especially during the time of Jacob's trouble, because that's when y'all are truly going to be trouble. When this society is in a lawless state, just straight up disorder, anarchy, so on and so forth, man. Okay, if you ain't got a man of the Lord, man, you fucked. Talking to you women out there, especially you Israelite women. Verse 11, "Tremble, ye women that are at ease. Be troubled, ye careless ones. Strip and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins." Right, gird sackcloth upon your loins is a metaphor for basically, the Lord is basically telling these women to mourn for the times that are coming upon them. Especially in this time, right? The time of Jacob's trouble. Because we know the scriptures in 2 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, tells us that in the last days, many perilous times shall come. Perilous being what? Hard to do, to take, to approach, troublesome, fierce, savage. And, ultimately, we know, according to Jeremiah 30, men are going to be in great fear, right? As the scriptures say, "Why do I see every man with his hands on his loins?" Right, as a woman in travail, paraphrasing, and that's for the great fear. And I'm bringing out that point because we know the scriptures tell us that the woman is the weaker vessel, mentally, physically, spiritually, So if the average man is going to have his hands on his loins as a woman in travail, basically going to the average man being in an extremely fearful state, okay, how much more you women all right, who are the weaker vessel. So once again, you're being forced into a position, all right, your back is against the wall, and the only way out is for you to acknowledge that you need a man of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, to ultimately live, man. You know, to make it through these times. Verse 12, they shall lament for the teats, for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. You know, once again, they're going to desire, you know, and one, they're going to be sorrowful, right, for the loss of the benefits that they once had, and they're going to desire those things. But ultimately, the Lord, he's taking away these things completely, you know, and the only way out for you women is through a man of the Lord. Okay, let's go to the book of Isaiah, the 13th chapter. In verse 12, it says, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. And this doesn't just speak to any man. It speaks specifically to a man of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Because we know, okay, the average man in these last days is going to die off, you know, due to the famines, right, the wars that's taking place, you know, which ultimately that's going to bring in, right, an extreme shortage of men. Okay, Second Ezra, the 16th chapter, and verse 30, starting at verse 33. It says, the virgin shall mourn, having no bridegrooms. The woman shall mourn, having no husbands. Their daughters shall mourn, having no helpers. In the wars shall their bridegrooms be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine. And even when you go into Second Ezra, the 16th chapter, when you read up above this, it's going into how, you know, ultimately there's going to be a lack of men in that day, you know, due to the various different judgments and plagues that the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is bringing. You see, so this is going to serve, all right, to ultimately show the world who the Lord's chosen men are. And this is also going to raise the stock of the Lord's men in these last days, because the men of the Lord are ultimately, you know, mainly going to be the only ones left, man, you know, for the most part. And ultimately, these women, they're going to have no choice but to seek to a man of the Lord for salvation and protection in that day. You see? So, once again, reading Isaiah 13 and 12, it says, I will make a man more precious than fine gold. You know, because what we know, men, you know, in general are going to become very rare in that day, because what they're going to be dying off due to the wars and the famines, as we just read. Right. So ultimately, a man of the Lord is going to stand out heavily in that day amongst these women, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. You see, so a man of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, is going to be very valuable, all right, to these women in these last days. OK, because ultimately, that's the only way you women are getting out of this, man, through a man of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. And this is where Isaiah 4:1 is going to kick in. And before we get that, let me go ahead and get this. This is something I was thinking earlier, and even going into the point I made earlier, you know, basically a lot of men are waking up, and, you know, of course, you know, like I said earlier, of course, you know, men, certain men, you know, some men are still simps. You know, a lot of men are still simps. You know, they see a bitch, you know, with a nice ass, you know, nice titties, you know, long hair, pretty face, white shite brining teeth. You know, her personality ain't shit, but her outward appearance makes men to look over that. But we in a time where, once again, a lot of men, okay, are waking up and they're looking far beyond outward appearance. And these are individuals who aren't in the truth. So how much more the men of the Lord? Okay, this is Sirach. Let's see. I might have the wrong chapter. Let's see here. Stumble not. Oh, no, I was in the right chapter. Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 25 and verse 21. It says, stumble not at the beauty of a woman and desire her not for pleasure. Because ultimately, you know, a woman, you know, she was made to be a helpmeet unto a man. Now, of course, you know, sex, you know, that is indeed, you know, a very important part, of a relationship between a man and a woman. But hey, a woman is there as a helpmeet, to help take the load off of her husband. While the man is out at work, she's at home, cleaning, making sure that the home is straight, taking care of the children, making sure everybody's fed and things of that nature. You see, but I was mainly aiming at the first part of this verse where it says, "Stumble not at the beauty of a woman," is what to you women. All right, your beauty is not going to get you delivered in that day. All right, and hey, we at that point, man. The men of the Lord are at that point where hey, fuck beauty. You could have all that on the outward appearance, but if your personality is full of shit, man, then we ain't taking you on. And guess what? The beautiful thing about it is we're gonna have the kitty of the pick of the litter, Salakia, the pick of the litter, and we gonna be able to see through all y'all bullshit, and the Lord's Spirit is gonna be put upon us, to discern and determine which one of you women are going to be good for us in that day. And the Lord, He's gonna give us the ability to choose. So, hey, man, beauty is only going to get you so far. And once again, that's the reason I was bringing out the scripture, because the men of the Lord, are fed up with you women. All right. Our mind's like, no, man, fuck the beauty. If you full of shit, you can't get with us. So let's go from there to, let's see. I'll go ahead and leave you with this in Isaiah. Salakia. Chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, "And in that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man," which this day is going to ultimately the troublous times that we're coming into. It's not a singular day, but the times, the tribulation, hardships, affliction, mainly talking about Jacob's trouble. Okay. That's when these women are going to earnestly seek after a man, and not just any man, a man of the Lord. It says, "And in that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man," which 7 is a number of completion. So basically, however many women, the Lord has created, that man of the Lord to be able to deal with in that day, that's how many women that man is going to get. You see? A number that's complete for his spirit. It says, saying, "We will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by thy name to take away our reproach." You see, and we know that back in the ancient days, 2 ways a woman will be in reproach. Okay, it was 1, if they didn't have a husband, and 2, they didn't have children. You see, and we know, according to what's that, 1 Timothy, the 2nd chapter, that ultimately the woman is going to be saved in childbearing. You see, so ultimately a woman being joined into a man of the Lord in these last days for salvation, and her bearing that seed of the man of the Lord, guess what? Her reproach is taken away. You see, but we know this isn't going to apply to all women. A lot of women are going to come and say, hey, we'll provide for ourselves, we'll bring such and such. Okay, but just let me be your woman. Okay, and a lot of you, man, y'all not going, the men of the Lord ain't going to pick you. The men of the Lord just straight up ain't going to pick you. Okay, so ultimately, this here in Isaiah 4 and 1, all right, not every woman is going to be picked by a man of the Lord. Because we know, as a matter of fact, I'll leave you with this in Ezekiel, the 9th chapter. Okay, because a lot of women are getting ready to perish. And guess what? These women who are getting ready to perish means what? That they were not chosen by a man of the Lord. Okay, Ezekiel 9 and 4, "And the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof." And ultimately speaks to the men of the Lord, speaking out against wickedness, complaining to the Lord for the wickedness that's going on in the city, here in this society, primarily America, which amongst the abominations that's going on here in the society, all right, is feminism. Okay, and the Lord's getting ready to do away with that. And we know that that word mark goes into the Hebrew word tawah, meaning what? A sign of exemption from judgment, which ultimately the elect of the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is going to have this mark. Verse 5. And to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. And this is to those who are outside of the elect, outside of those that have the Tawah. All right, those who are not exempt from judgment. Okay. It says, verse 6, slay utterly old and young, both maids, which these are women, and little children, little boys and girls, and women. You see, so in these last days, man, when trouble hits, man, a lot of women / girls are getting ready to die. You see, and once again, man, to you women out there, if a man of the Lord does not choose you in that day, you are fucked, and you have no way out. It says, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin in my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men, which were before the house, which, ancient men go into the so-called leaders, of these other camps who are pushing falsehood, doing straight up wickedness. And we know that when the Lord brings judgment, he's going to start with his people, the Israelites. And in that, once again, a lot of you women are going to die. And I'm going to say it again. If a man of the Lord, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, does not choose you in that day, I'm talking to you women, mainly you Israelite women, you are fucked. You have no way out. Okay, you're going to be subject to whatever comes upon you. Be it rape, starvation, whatever the case may be, you're going to be subject to it. And that's that. So it will behoove you Israelite women to humble down, all right, and acknowledge your position, your role as a woman, acknowledge the fact that you are beneath the man, okay, and submit to your natural order. But a lot of y'all ain't going to do it. A lot of y'all just going to stay proud, and that's going to be to your own detriment. But I'm gonna go ahead and close out right there. I pray that this lesson was edifying, informative, and alarming to the elect body of the nation of Israel. And without further ado, I'd like to close out by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and preach this truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopeful elect. The Lord, I'll see you in the next lesson. Till then, I say shalom.